Welcome back to Cricket Table Presents It's Good to Be the King, a 13-part retrospective into the career of one Melvin James Kaminsky, aka Mel Brooks. We'll be covering his full directorial filmography, as well as a couple ancillary Brooks projects, concluding with 2005's The Producer's movie musical. Today we're talking about Brooks' sophomore effort as a writer-director, 1970's The 12 Chairs, one of many film adaptations of the 1928 novel by Elif and Petrov. The 12 Chairs stars Ron Moody as Ippolit Vorobyaninov, a down-on-his-luck former aristocrat on a wild goose chase to find his family's missing jewels, safely tucked away inside one of a dozen lost chairs. He's joined by charismatic con man Ostap Bender, played by Frank Langella, as the duo race against time to find the loot before Dom DeLuise's Father Fyodor. Joining me today to discuss the film is film critic Kim Pierce. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Excited to sit down and talk about this one.
Yeah, we were just talking about pre-record about this is probably one of the ones people be like, wait, what is this? The Brooks deep cuts, of which there are a few. So before we get into Mel Brooks proper, tell people a little bit about who you are and what you have going on in the world.
I am diving into everything I can get my little hands on in terms of film criticism. Probably my biggest place is Geek Girl Authority. That's where all my contemporary stuff goes to. So new releases and all that craziness. But I've been throwing myself into TikTok and YouTube and Instagram, trying to A, figure out video, but B, that's the place where I
Mm,
can talk about the passion projects and the
yeah.
the films that I love and just dive into all that good stuff.
Are you finding a lot of engagement on TikTok? Because I'm on TikTok, but not really on TikTok.
Mhm.
You know how that is.
I go through I understand that more than you know. It depends on the film. Like, I will be shocked on certain things. There's been certain, like, Mumford, it was, like, in 1998.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh
that
yeah.
film, I got huge I was expecting nothing, and then
Really
a ton of
interesting.
it'll come completely out of nowhere, and then the ones where you go, it's like writing in the way. It's like, "Oh, this is sure to get something,"
Yeah.
and then no one reads it.
It happens like on Twitter all the time.
Mhm.
Like you tweet something like, "Oh, I crystallized my thoughts on this film perfectly." Nobody sees it. You just respond to someone else's random chain of comments on something.
Mhm.
All of a sudden you're like, "Wait, what? Hundreds and hundreds of engagements and likes and like
The
what is
most
this?"
inane GIF gets
Yeah, it's
dozens
so
of likes.
strange. It's to the point that I'm not wasting that much mental energy on it anymore, Kim. Like I swear. I'm
That's why
putting
I
it
say
out
the
there.
passions. I just do what I want.
If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's if it, if it's important to me and it makes me happy, hence this project. I've been
Exactly.
talking for a long while about doing a Mel Brooks project, and this is sort of my effort in dipping back into video after several years, and hopefully, more of this to come. But before we talk about the 12 Chairs, what was your introduction to Mel Brooks? What is his, when I say the name Mel Brooks and his filmography, what does that mean to you?
Mel Brooks is one of those filmmakers. He ranks almost like Steven Spielberg, just in terms of he's been in my life for as long as I can remember.
Right.
My father's one of his favorite films was Young Frankenstein. So I've been watching that film for probably since I was entirely too young to completely understand it. And I tend to have a childish sense of humor, so just watching them, I made it all the way through his filmography a couple of years ago. I kind of caught
Nice.
most of the essentials and then was like, "You know what? There's not many films, so I'm gonna finish it." And
Right.
I've always fascinated by 1950s TV, so his work writing on Sid Caesar and a few other things like that. He keeps popping up in areas that I'm fascinated about. So I've just always been drawn to his work.
Yeah, it's interesting how ever present he's been and how, as an EGOT, he permeates so many different corners of the entertainment industry. Like a
Totally.
couple of years ago during the pandemic, there was an animated movie about a dog who wanted to be a samurai, which was a loose adaptation of Blazing Saddles. It was initially called Blazing Samurai.
Oh,
It's like
how cute.
Mel Brooks voices a supporting character in it. It's
Mhm.
just like that's where we're at, and that current culture is continually riffing on his films. And when it comes to the parody film, he's, one of the best in the game. This one, though, stands out. You mentioned Young Frankenstein, which we'll get to in a couple episodes. A lot of his films are parodies or satires on specific genres. This one is not necessarily that. This is more of a
Right.
direct adaptation of a pre-existing book. And obviously, The 12 Chairs was beloved by critics. Brooks has often said it's one of his favorites of the films that he's made. But I would say, and we were talking about this beforehand, it's arguably the most obscure Brooks film, or definitely in the conversation. Why do you think it doesn't have more of an established legacy? And how does it compare? Why is it such an outlier in his filmography?
It's definitely lighter in terms of Brooks fare, I would say. In terms it's not the humor's there and there's some incredible laugh out loud moments in there, but it's not as over the top throughout. You don't have like I was thinking through on this most recent rewatch how close these characters are almost to the producers, but they don't
Yeah,
elevate to the same extent. It's not as slapsticky kind of throughout.
sure.
It kind of goes through waves and it's not as identifiably Brooksian to use the word I wrote in my notes. There's you don't have as a filmmaker, he's always had the same stable of stars. You always see Gene Wilder popping up. You always
Mhm.
see what people Dom DeLuise who's in this film. There's a few
Right.
other pop up repeatedly. There's a few here. I mean, we've got Dom DeLuise, and then we've got, and I'm going to butcher the name, Andreas was it Vostenas in who's in the
From the
producers as
producers,
well.
yeah.
But Frank Langella, just starting out, Ron Moody, not a Brooksian person, so it's not as easy to peg. It's different.
Yeah, you mentioned Gene Wilder too. That I think it's interesting too. This film does have a lot of similarities in some ways with the
Mhm.
producers. Both of them are a duo of con men, pulling off some kind of scheme. Here, it's more of a chase movie.
Right.
In that film and in this one, it's a sort of a middle-aged man and like a younger sort of, ingenue, I guess, in a way. And in this one, it's sort of the roles are reversed,
Right.
where the older man, played by Ron Moody, here is a little more over the top, a little more heightened, and the younger one yeah, it's an interesting flip on the dynamic. Like, it definitely feels like of a piece with the producers in some way,
Mhm.
but he wanted to put Gene Wilder in this movie as Vorobyaninov, which I find very curious
Yeah.
casting. How do you think that would have changed the portrayal? And do you think to your earlier point, do you think
Mhm.
that this story would have resonated more and had more of a sticky legacy with Brooks' other films had Gene Wilder been in this?
Double-edged answer
Yeah.
coming here. I I love Ron Moody in this role, and I think I would say stick with how it is. I was thinking about it in terms of Gene Wilder, kind of reading that and, learning that he was in contention for that. It would have been so close to the producers. It would have there I
Yeah.
was watching Moody throughout, and there are so many points where I was like, "This is basically Leo Bloom." The amount of the heightened anxiety, the kind of the outbursts that he has, I could see Wilder playing the part incredibly easily.
Mhm.
And kind of with that, I think it would have potentially I don't know. I helped the film in the popular mindset because I think if Wilder would have been in there, I think it would be closer tied to the Brooks, auteur, legacy.
Yeah.
It would have fit in there so nicely. But I think Moody is doing such fun, interesting work that I love everything he brings to that.
It's also, if that had happened, we might not have gotten Gene Wilder in, Blazing Saddles or Young
Right.
Frankenstein, which are indelible comedic
True.
performances. And I agree with you. I love Ron Moody in this movie. I think he's so good. And so is Frank Langella, which, to your point about Vorobyaninov being the more Leo Bloom-esque, it's Bender. That's sort of the twist
Mhm.
I think I was referencing with the producer's counterpoint. It's Bender who's really younger, but also more of the professional. Like, this is
Yeah.
his bag. He thinks very quickly on his feet. We have a lot of him slipping in and out of places under, in disguise, so to speak. And I just every time I watch this is like maybe the second or third time I've watched it for
Mhm.
in preparation for this.
Same.
This is Frank Langella's film debut. He won the National Board of Review Award for playing Ostep, and it's wild to go back and see Frank Langella now, as of this recording, 86 years old, in his prime here, in his early in his career. Where do you think his performance fits with the pantheon of Mel Brooks breakouts? Because he really carries a lot of this movie as far as the comedy is concerned, as far as
Mhm.
reacting to Ron Moody. He has just that instant leading man look. Like when he comes on screen, and I believe he's in sort of an intimate situation with a young woman when we first see him, you're just like, "Okay, this guy's got it." Like, this guy has just, like, super suave just
Mhm.
general thoughts on Frank Langella, I guess, in this movie.
This was mind-blowing for me the first time I watched
Yeah.
this. I Frank Langella has been perennially old in my brain. He
Yeah, right?
he is around for so long, but I think the first time I'd watched this, I think Trial of the Chicago 7 had just came out.
Okay,
So I
yeah,
literally had him in my head as the judge, 80, 79, 80 years old. He's, the stoic judge on the bench. And I'm watching this film going, wait a second. And then I IMDb'd it. It was like, holy cow. Looks so different than what and you're right, completely right. The comedy is spot on that and I would never have thought of him before that as a comedic figure. I've since kind of started revisiting his
right.
work when he was younger. But that opening scene where he's got the eye patch, I've left my eye and my left leg at the Winter Palace and promptly, ends up with the woman and then he's tapping into throughout, and I started really picking up on this within the last rewatch. I could compare Moody to, Gene Wilder and the producers. There are moments, they're more subdued, but Langella seems to be almost doing a Zero Mostel
Yeah,
and a Bialystok, and it just fascinates me to watch the subtle kind of intricacies of that performance. And it's a fascinating debut. It's in terms of Brooks' debuts, it's hard to not put that near the top. There's some other
yeah.
performers that I dearly love with every fiber of my being. But in terms of talent and staying power and, classically trained actors, he's right up there. And it's incredible to see him starting out like that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier about how Mel Brooks had such an eye for talent and an eye for
Mhm.
casting and really had a rapport with a lot of his actors. It makes you sort of wish that he and Langella had done another movie together, like he couldn't have
Mhm.
fit in somewhere else. This is obviously the first time we get Dom DeLuise in here. And it's just funny to go back and see Frank Langella, like you said, who we know mostly as being 60s, 70s, and older,
Mhm.
and then here you're like, wow, Frank Langella was hot in 1970. Like he's like clooning it up in here.
I was shocked. The first time I watched it, I think I went to Twitter, X Twitter, and I think I said something to the equivalent of was, "Wow, Frank Langella was hot. Who would have thought?"
Yeah.
And I had Gen X, young baby boomer Gen X women just lighting up my Twitter thread, going, "If you like this, check this out. He was hot."
Well, I remember when I was a kid, my mom was a big fan of the Dracula movie he did in
Yes, I
1979.
I need to
And now
watch it.
seeing this now, I'm like, I get it. Like
Mhm,
now I understand now. At the time, I was just like, what's up with this? There's a million versions of Dracula. But now it all makes sense. Um,
mhm,
Yeah, he's so good in this. Speaking of Dom DeLuise, obviously we see him uh, coming in. He becomes a Brooks regular,
mhm.
and he feels like he's in a different movie in some ways in this, which I really enjoy the movie that he's in. He spends a lot of his screen time by himself, sort of a parallel story going on with Father Fyodor. How do you think that his side of the hunt for the 12 chairs plays into the narrative as I guess as a counterpoint to what the our two main characters are up to?
The cynical, kind of filmy person in me says he almost feels like he's present to kind of bring it back to Brooks.
Mm,
He represents the Brooks that we're used to. And we get such kind of we get the fleeting moments of it with the other two leads, but Dom DeLuise has one speed.
yeah.
Dom DeLuise has been that, he's that figure in the mid 60s on television, and he was that in the TV shows in the 90s, I remembered. Love him or you hate him, but he is playing that broad, I guess, comedy to a T, and it's enjoyable. I love this scene. I I don't know the characters' names. It's one of his initial attempts to try and get the chairs, and just the screaming and the physical. He's so physical. He's such a loud at ease comic. He's a hoot. It feels like, and I know we'll get this to a later question. Thinking about, what comes to mind when I kind of think about his role, like a Sidney Greenstreet or a Peter Lorre, and kind of like
Yeah,
noir
yeah, yeah.
in the 40s, kind of the other person, the other person searching for the treasure, the
Yeah.
other the other villain, but he's not necessarily a villain.
Well, and also, I mentioned about Brooks and his parodies. Ostap mentions at one point, he's like, "Oh, this is just like a detective
Mhm.
story. We have a mysterious rival." Do you think is that the kind of film that Brooks is sort of satirizing this time around? Is it a little bit of like a noir-esque vibe, like a almost like a thriller, but like from a very Brooksian lens?
That's where my head went. I mean, and I can
Yeah,
totally see Frank Langella doing something like that. And everybody's in this, they're smarmy. We're not pulling any punches. These are
right.
not the most likable characters outside of the comedy makes it all inherently likable, but take out the humor. These aren't great people. These aren't, and we know at the end, they've completely revert back to their old ways. So with the construction of this story, that kind of the almost bleak nature, even the setting, Russia
Yeah,
post-revolution,
right.
everything comes together. But yeah, there is a hint of noir, and it's subtle, but I think it's there.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that at the end they just they just are back to their old tricks, because that's in the last conversation I had where my guest and I talked about the producers. We were like, well, we're supposed to be on their side, kind of, but also,
Mhm.
like you said, Leo Bloom and Max Bialystock are also not great people. And by the end, they learn nothing. So, is the movie trying to tell us, like, not that there's a lesson, but what is the movie saying about those characters? I guess in both cases, but specifically in the 12 chairs, if they, this whole transformative journey together, all they learn is that, oh,
It meant
I can
nothing.
do this better. I'm more effective with this person instead of by myself. And that's pretty much all they learn.
That's their moment of Louis. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yes, ex- exactly.
It's yeah, they're better together, but yeah, ultimately they seem to have they've learned nothing, but they'll just continue palling around and causing trouble in 1920s Russia.
And the ending of the book, Vorobyaninov is supposed to kills Ostap,
Mhm.
and after they get the final chair, and then Mel Brooks was like, "Well, if you're gonna sit through 2 hours of a movie, you better have a satisfying ending." He's like, "I'm not gonna leave you with a bad taste in your mouth because popcorn's bad enough," like classic Mel
Mhm.
Brooks kind of thing to say. Uh, and like I was saying, like this and the producers, they both reaffirm that friendship, that partnership in crime, and so it's really interesting that he does that. He does that sort of theme twice in a row, and I just feel like that's a really interesting take on the material. And again, this is a novel that's been adapted a bazillion times.
It would be he avoids falling into what could be a sizable trap. Black
Yeah.
comedy, dark comedy is so hard. And then you've got a fairly unforgiving setting in there. You've got this is
Hmm.
Russian literature. This is deep, 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 deep subject matter. I was a kid who read Les Miserables 3 times. I tried War and Peace, and I could not make it through. There is something so meaty but so challenging about Russian literature.
Hmm.
And he know it's it's such a savvy move on Brooks's part to be able to say, "No, no, no, we're gonna end it light," because if they he's not doing a direct he's not working in parody like he as
Right.
extensively here as he is in some of his other things. So he's got that freedom, but yeah, he if it ends like that, if any of that humor falters, you've got a real challenging film there.
I think it's interesting too now, come to think of it. It seems like in his earlier films, especially the producers, this one and Blazing Saddles, he
Yeah.
has a real knack before he slips into focused more on parodies. He has a real knack for tackling heavier subject matter with a lighter touch, be it the
Mhm.
Holocaust, post-revolution Russia, racism. It's really he has a real has a real gift for like addressing these serious issues,
Mhm.
poking fun at them a little bit, but also still, respecting what the issue is and kind of shining a light on it. What are your thoughts on that part of Brooks's filmography? Because I think we're gonna get that again later on in To Be or Not to Be, because there's again that's set during World War II as well.
I with saying that, my head went immediately to History of the World Part 1, the
Yeah.
dance number, The Inquisition.
Yes. Yeah.
He brought or in something like Life Stinks is another attempt where you really see him playing in not pleasant subject matter. I
Yeah.
If you listen to his interviews and listen to him talk as a filmmaker, he was so shaped by the environment that he grew up in. And he's very, very working class Brooklyn. He pulls no punches about mom having to struggle and kind of that life. And I think there's, a respect for that subject, a respect for the world, a very probably a cynical, very cynical eye there, but
Yeah.
he's that jerk kid in, your high school who could just make anything funny. But it's so refreshing and so light how he does that throughout, kind of how he injects the little moments of humor throughout. I was just rewatching a couple scenes before we started just to make sure I was fresh. And there's one scene where the theater company is getting ready to take the chairs, and then they go, "Oh, oh, take those chairs," and you just see the sheet like lurch out as Moody tries to reach out and get out there to stop
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
And it's so quick and it's so easy, but I bust out laughing every time I see it.
I love that you mentioned Life Stinks, because that's I mean, I don't think it's inaccurate to say that one and this one are the 2 films that
Yeah.
good luck finding them. Like, if they're not streaming somewhere, and Life Stinks, I don't think is streaming anywhere right now, so even as the person doing a 13-part coverage of his filmography, I'm like, I might have to go to eBay and buy a DVD or something, because that's about the only place you can find Life Stinks. And this film, that film, and the producers are
Mhm.
what, according to the Los Angeles Times, what Brooks considers like his best films. And they are, like you were saying, he's very interested in class structures
Mhm.
kind of scrutinizing that a bit. And I think it is like you pointed out, his like working class upbringing. I just think it's those I think those films were him trying to balance his comedic chops with actually not a message movie, but like an
Mhm.
issue movie, I guess.
And those are and this is a subject matter particularly that's I mean, when you listen to Brooks talk about this film, he talks about shooting in Yugoslavia being, so close to home. He equates it to almost being home with his family's heritage and all of that.
Mhm.
And you can tell, I mean, I'm not savvy enough with his interviews to really come at him from a political perspective, but there's
Right.
so much in there about communism. There's so many, the scene I jumped to, they go into the bureau. They're in the government building, and it's like the Bureau of Tables, the
Mhm.
Bureau of Tapestries, the Bureau of Furniture that's not mentioned in another bureau.
Right.
He's built up he has opinions on this. He knows this topic. And he doesn't necessarily 100% show his cards, but you can tell he's feeling things about this subject.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's we sort of touched on it already, but how do you think that the comedic style reflects the social and the political climate of the movie? I it's because it does have not only the slapstick and like the sense of irony that is very much Brooks, but also there's like sped moments where they're chasing each other and it's like very feels very silent film era. Is
Mhm.
this, I guess what I'm asking is this the road to silent movie? Is it, does it begin here?
That's where my head went. That
Yeah.
is, because I was fascinated by silent movie when I watched that film. That is such an experiment, because I had watched like that, Nickelodeon, Bogdanovich's Nickelodeon right at the same time, and they're all really close together. But in this film, and I almost wonder if it's slightly tying it to the period too, because this is set, what, 1927,
Yes.
and we would still be seeing silent films at that time. So I wonder if this is him kind of playing with that a little bit, this tying it into the 20s and using it as an opportunity to play with that style. That, because that would have been, he was so removed from it by that point that it would have been a style for him. It would have been a challenge. It would have been a stylistic thing to play with, and leading to silent movie.
Speaking of stylistic things to play with, he also wrote a song for this movie,
Mhm.
Hope for the Best, Expect the Worst, which he was encouraged to do so by his wife, Anne Bancroft, who was like, you should just write an original song for every movie. And then he pretty much did that. Like every movie going forward, High Anxiety has a theme song, Blazing Saddles has a theme song. Yeah, like a lot of these movies are pseudo musicals. I think it's interesting going back and tracking his filmography from the beginning, going through and being like, oh, you could see like this lit up something in him
Mhm.
where either where it's silent movie or where the producers and then that advice from his wife and then his filmography. And then later on, we get Tony Award winning Mel Brooks for the producers. Young Frankenstein becomes a musical. So it's interesting to see his like what 60-year career in context and watch how the trickle effect.
Completely.
Did
Well,
you feel
and
that watching this now? Like,
yes, I mean, it led the producers, actually, the 2005 producers had actually really led me to this film. I knew about this for so long because he talked about this 12 Chairs so often in the run up, all the success that was the producers on Broadway. You know, the as many Tonys as they won and the behemoth that was. I was a big Broadway kid, so producers was one of my favorites. And he always talked about writing this song. And it did never he never mentioned in the interviews, Springtime for Hitler and the other ones. He always referenced the 12 Chairs and the song he wrote for that and how it started him down that course and leading to, writing the entire album for, the producers. And he is such a savvy filmmaker. It's fascinating to listen to him do interviews because, I mean, you can he's grown with this
mhm,
industry, starting in comedy, but then cutting his teeth on, with Sid Caesar and the writer's
yeah,
room that Sid Caesar had. Some of the greatest, Neil Simon was there, some of the greatest comedic Carl Reiner that really shaped comedy in the middle of the 20th century. Coming to Hollywood at, still relatively young age, in his 20s and in his 30s. He's talked in I think it was in a Cavett interview. He talks about meeting Harry Cohn.
mhm,
He saw all of that, and you could see he's learning as he goes, and he's figuring out what he's good at. But then you have and he hits his phases, and he hit right after this, Blazing Saddles starts him on the zenith, of
yeah,
everything that is Brooks, and he kind of rides that, but, and then hits Life Stinks and does the film for him, the little movie. But it's 60 years, and it's the best way. I'm a completist at heart, and approaching this how you're approaching it's, well, that's some of the best way to do it because you
yeah,
see how it builds, you see how they grow. You could go, "Oh, this is the first time Dom DeLuise came in," and see where he people, Gene Wilder in the next one, and just so much to play with. It's really fun to just dive in and watch it all the way through.
It's also the first time we see, I know he has a vocal cameo in Springtime
Mhm.
for Hitler
Yep.
in the producers, in the film and the stage production. But this is the first time we see Mel Brooks on screen in a Mel Brooks movie as well as T-Con, and obviously playing multiple characters throughout. Kind of it's interesting too how as the films get bigger and his celebrity increases, I don't know if it's the industry or he just feels more confident because there's a period there where he is the playing the main character when you get
Mhm.
to, Silent Movie or High Anxiety or some of the movies there where he is more front and center. What was your initial impressions here seeing, oh, this is Mel Brooks directing himself for the first time, and how that plays into the films to come?
It it's so interesting because it's basically a cameo. I was
Yeah.
reading kind of like Ebert's reviews, and it's such a short little contained part, but he steals some of those scenes, and that's really hard to do. Those moments with him and Ron Moody together are
Mhm.
just perfect. I love the chemistry those two have. But and you can I mean, and he had been, done his television stuff, but it's almost I I would wonder in the background of it if this was him going, can I do this? Because then he
Yeah.
gets what by History of the World Part 1, he's a sizable part, Robin Hood Men in Tights much later. He's in there throughout the entire film, Spaceballs. So he's learning. And I
Yeah.
keep coming back to that in all the blurbs. He's experimenting and he's learning. And this is only his second film
Isn't
out of
that
the
crazy?
gate. But it's such a I think it's well made. I look
Yeah.
at it, it doesn't feel like Brooks, but it's a it'd be a solid studio film in the '60s. It's
Yeah.
shot
Oh, yeah.
perfectly fine. It looks beautiful. They've got the comedy in there, of course, but I almost see it as he's trying to find his voice a little bit. He found it
I
with
think so.
producers, and then this is him trying something a little different and continuing to just play with things and seeing what takes.
It's interesting. Like you said, it is a very solid film, but it's what part of why it bums me out that it has such a minimal cultural footprint, you
Mhm,
know? All these other movies we've talked about, especially since this being his second movie, in some ways, I feel like you could tell there's more confidence behind the camera, I
mhm.
think, because he has such clarity of vision even in his first film. So, like, seeing him here, that he has the comfort level to take a story that on paper is similar to the producers in some respects, but then has a vastly different setting, has a vastly different tone in places. It's both sort of bleak, but also kind of ultimately hopeful in a like in a twisted way, I guess, considering the characters we're spending time with.
It's
Um,
so
yeah,
challenging, really, to think of it as a second role that he would tackle something that's, like, such challenging subject matter, and it's like, The Producers is so big. I love The
yeah,
Producers. I've ranked it my number 1 Brooks, but it's a big film. This is a
mhm.
much quieter film. This is it has t the actors have to work a little bit harder. They're being a little more subtle. So for him to have the confidence to be able to pull back a little bit and tackle a film that relies on your performances, on the camera work, on less of the big comedy. It's such a confident move for second time out. And you wouldn't know he was such a baby
No.
filmmaker still at that point.
No, not at all. Even like even it's a little thing, but even like the posters or the box art or whatever, the promotional art, if you see
Mhm,
this, like if you go to the Wikipedia page, it's a poster with Mel Brooks in the center, Ron Moody and Dom DeLuise. No Frank Langella. If you look at like the DVD that I think I have that was
mhm.
like by itself, it has a big picture of Mel Brooks. Nobody else, I think. Some of them just like it's like even with the market, it's I think it's just a very hard movie to sell. How do you entice casual moviegoers to see this post Russian Revolution movie that is It's very like as we've been saying, it's very
Mhm.
atypical for him, but it's very atypical for the studio system as well.
When you see it and the way describing that DVD cover, what jumps to mind is something like Sean Connery and Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
Yeah,
Jennifer Aniston and Leprechaun.
it's true.
How they have to kind of go back and go, okay, this person, hey, they're here. Watch
But
it,
where's
please.
Frank Langella in all of this art is my question. Frank Langella is like a very established actor at
Hmm.
later on in his career. So it's weird to me that he's never on there, especially since like we said, that's a face you put on a poster. Like what is going on?
The fact that it took me until I was in my 30s to be able to appreciate that was an
Yeah.
embarrassing revelation to go, wow, I've never thought of this before. They are clearly, I bet they were terrified. I bet they got this
Yeah.
film and they were absolutely, I'm really regretting now actually not having watched trailers for this because before we sat down, because I would wonder if Springtime for Hitler is somehow worked into the trailers or if they're, from the director of the producers, because you can see the studio going, oh God, oh,
Right.
how are we going to sell Russian Revolution?
Exactly. Exactly.
But
It's yeah.
it's they desperately wanted, desperately tying this to Brooks. They probably would have loved to have seen that character last the entire time through because y you when I watched this, I was shocked. I wrote a whole article for Geek Girl Authority ranking my Mel Brooks movies. And I had very little expectations truthfully going into this film
Mhm.
because not knowing much about it, it's kind of it's one of the offshoots. It ended up being in my top half of his films.
Yeah.
I was shocked by how much I liked it, by how different it was, and I mean, I think the thing that I put in there was you wouldn't know this was a Brooks film, but it's still such an incredible film. And there's that dividing line between the critics and the audiences because the critics can come at critics will come at to it and go, "Oh, look at the style," or look at
Mhm.
we have to sit down and watch it, so there's more of an appreciation there. If you watch the trailer for something like this, if you go in expecting Mel Brooks doing one thing and you don't get it, that's a harder sell. So it's really a detriment to the film and the popular, I guess, zeitgeist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also that sort of two-pronged approach, like, well, his earlier films are in a way more interesting because as we've been saying, he's finding his voice, he's figuring out what niche he wants to fit into. Later
Mhm.
on, even though the movies are perhaps more crowd-pleasing, it is very much like, here's this parody of a silent movie, here's this parody of a Hitchcock movie, here's this parody of, like, historical epic, here's this parody of Star Wars and sci-fi.
Spaceballs.
Yeah, exactly. I love Spaceball.
I
That's
love
not shade
Spaceballs.
to any of those movies, to be fair. I saw and I've said this on, I think, the last episode, people will probably hear me say this a lot. I saw Spaceballs way more before and repeatedly, before I saw Star Wars and many,
Mhm.
many times before I was a Spaceballs fan before I was a Star Wars fan, that's I guess, is what I'm trying to say, and
I was a young Frankenstein fan before
yes.
I saw Frankenstein, so I can
Well,
understand
and
that.
that's the other thing too, like, a lot of these things his him taking on theater in the producers or
Mhm.
Russian literature here or westerns or monster movies, whatever. It's also in a way making something that is difficult material, like you were saying, and how he changed the ending here, making it more palatable to a broader audience and therefore serving as a gateway for him to kind of bring people into a new genre, a new type of
Mhm.
storytelling.
Well, and he's always emphasized approaching a story with love.
Yeah.
I forget which there was something, I'm spacing it out now. There was a film where he was thinking of doing it, but I think it was maybe a spy parody or a James Bond or something. There was a discussion of doing a spy spoof at some point, and he had said he didn't wasn't as familiar with the genres. He didn't have the same feelings for it, so he didn't tackle it.
Yeah.
And he's about it's about the passion for it, and you can see the passion in something like Spaceballs. Heck, I wrote an essay in college about Young Frankenstein, arguing Young Frankenstein is closer to the source material than, certain other versions.
Right.
He's using original sets in Young Frankenstein. So he studies the genre. He's approaching these films from a place of love. I'm sure he wants people to go read The 12 Chairs or see the other versions. I had no idea how many versions of this there was. I was
Yeah, me
shocked.
either.
But he
Me
goes
either.
in with such wisdom in the history and what all is being done, and it comes across, and I think the love for the subject matter here is very evident.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. He's and I think that's part of why he's such a fan favorite among,
Mhm,
comedy fans, and that you can feel that passion on screen. He tackles so many different things. He basically follows his own interests, and he's like, "Well, I like this, so, other people must like it too," and puts his own unique spin on a specific genre
mhm.
what have you. Also, we were talking about these characters and how their moral compass or lack thereof. Do you think the movie is suggesting anything about greed or human behavior, especially in the context of where the story is set?
I don't know if you can look at the Ron Moody character and just not say there's an effect on, like, greed and
Hmm.
the money. He 'Cause I was rewatching the ending, and he is so elevated in that ending, and you can almost see where it might come to bloodshed because he is so into into isn't a strong enough word, but he's so just fanatical about what happened to these chairs, and he's so
Yeah.
invested, and he's over the top, he's unhinged by this point. That his arc in particular, you really see that the fear, I think the fear of not having that money, of
Yeah.
what they've just been through in the revolution. So you've got the social and political aspect on that character as well, but if he doesn't find these shares, he's penniless. The
Hmm.
lifestyle he knows is gone. Eh, the Langella character, he's totally comfortable in that kind of schmarmy,
Yes.
dirty, rotten scoundrels, for lack of a better comparison, kind of
No, that's a good
character.
comparison.
He doesn't need those chairs, but Ron Moody's character needs that money. And you can really see him being sucked into the greed, I suppose.
Yeah, you can definitely see it. It's the movie is about as I see it, it's really kind of a study about obsession, right?
Mhm.
And it's like
Yes.
so obsessed with these chairs, and they're going across they're trotting all over the place
All
looking for
over
these freaking
Russia.
chairs all over Russia for these chairs. They're like back and forth, and maybe this chair goes here, and these three went this way, and all of that, right? And then ultimately, it almost costs him everything. What
Mhm.
literally has is almost gone. And then the hopefulness that I see in it, that I referenced earlier, is that, well, you did also kind of find a new way to live in the
Mhm.
process of this. You also kind of found, for lack of a better term, a friend. So maybe be thankful for what you have and try and make the best of it and build from there rather than clinging to what's already gone. Is so
Yeah.
if I was going to glean a message from this ridiculous movie in a lot of ways, that's what it is, I think.
Well, my head went immediately to listening to that, my head went immediately to the theme song. That kind
Yeah,
of you don't know what's coming tomorrow. You don't, it's I thought of the Russian Revolution, listening to the song, you know, aristocrats riding high, everything happens, boom, life is different. But
yeah,
you don't know what's coming down the road. You could not find the chairs, you could lose it all tomorrow, so just enjoy what you've got. And
yeah.
it it ends on that happy note where they can go off, exploiting the masses for money. They can,
Happy from their perspective, yeah. No, and then Jealous sells that moment so well where he's like, "Oh, fine, forget you, blah, blah, blah," and then he sees what he's doing, and he has a
Mhm.
moment where he's, like, almost touched by the fact that I
There's
mean,
such
am I wrong?
sincerity in that moment.
Yeah,
No.
there really is. There really is, and you're like, "Aw, they're gonna." be just keep swindling people out of money forever together. It's nice. They end up together
He
kind of.
was he was such he brings the theatrical honesty, the theatrical, kind of credibility almost to this part that you and
Yeah,
it's Ron Moody's similar because he's an Oscar winner by this point. I'm not as familiar with his career, but looking at, how Frank Langella had gotten this part, he was in on stage with Anne Bancroft. So he
right.
was stage is a whole different kind of seasoning. And well, you let that camera get in close on him and the sincerity, the feelings are there. I was watching this last night. I was trying to find an argument where looking at like some level of humanity and they're not great people but we're looking at the humanity in these people but they're still unredeemable but I think
Well, yes, but they have a
Langella sells
connection.
so much of that moment.
But they have a connection by the end,
Mhm.
and we want to see them hold on to that connection, I guess
Exact
is what it is. And again, that's the Bloom and Bialystok thing as
Mhm.
well. Bialystok and Bloom, I guess it should
Yeah.
be the other way around. Um, yeah, no, it's a weirdly heartfelt ending in a ways, which
Mhm.
I always forget, and then it hits, when he says that whole the epilepsy, my friends, epilepsy, the same disease that struck down our own beloved
Yeah.
Dostoevsky. All
And then
that. It's really yeah,
he
good.
cuts to Moody and just the joy on Moody's face
As
as
he's
he's
yeah,
thrashing around.
right.
It's so great.
And then it freezes on that
Yeah.
and on him, and then it goes to credits with that image.
Only
Um,
Brooks could do that.
yes,
Only Brooks.
100%, 100%. And also most of it, I mean, there are questionable elements which I'll get to in other films. Most of his
Mhm.
comedy has aged pretty well. I don't wanna jinx myself. There are elements in some of the upcoming movies where I was like, "Ooh, that I
Yeah.
don't know if that flies now," but a lot of it is pretty timeless, and I think especially these first 2 really benefit from being such a time capsule of the specific eras in
Mhm.
which they're set, to the point that the producer's musical is also set in the '60s. I think that this one being released in 1970 but set in 1927 does give it that timeless feel that us watching it and we're like, no, I don't know, this could be released now and probably still be successful. Um, yeah,
To have comedy is so hard. I tend to have, I've been deep in the classics for so long. I usually have a pretty good tolerance where I could go, oh, ugh, but yeah, still watch it. Nothing really hit me in this one, really, that I went,
no,
the kids won't like that.
right,
Nothing
yeah,
like Roger DeVry and the producers. You've got elements there where it's like, oh, the youths are gonna have problems with that, but
right.
yeah, no.
Well, no, and that's the thing too. Like, obviously, just because it's not PC now doesn't mean I'm like, well, strike it from the record. But
Mhm.
it's always
Oh, yeah.
interesting with comedies to sort of reevaluate them in a modern context. Like, ooh, that doesn't work now, but it's funny in this movie, I guess, if you isolate it from, you know, the current context. Is there anything about the 12 chairs that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure we mentioned? A favorite line or moment or performance?
Um,
I think we've sort of touched on a lot of it, but
the I mean, my favorite performance by far and away, and I've said this already, was Frank Langella. That
yeah.
was what I kept going back to in this film. It's been a couple of years since I watched it initially, and I wrote about kind of him when I wrote about it, and that stuck with me, and that very much defined it for me. There's some great moments kind of throughout, and it was good to watch it for that, being able to see the little bits of, visual comedy that I had
Mhm.
missed. But I think we've covered so much of it. It's such a fascinating deep cut. I really hope people check it out.
Yeah, I do too. It's unfortunately, this is the power of physical media. It's not streaming anywhere that I can see.
No,
And
yeah.
you can I think you can find it, the easiest way to get your hands on it, I think, is, like, if you search around on the internet or in, like, you use DVD stores for, like, that Mel Brooks box set that they had on
Mhm.
DVD, they had on Blu-ray, it's included in there, that's how I have it. And, yeah, I would highly encourage people to check it out. It's just if you think you've seen all of Mel Brooks' movies, you probably haven't. This is probably
Exactly.
one of probably two. Life Stinks being the other one that you're like, there's another one between the producers and Blazing. Yeah, you're missing stuff. Definitely worth watching. Definitely
Mhm.
a fun movie. Frank Langella, obviously, like we said, steals the show. Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I'm glad that we were able to do this. Kim, thanks so much for coming on to talk about The 12 Chairs, a movie that always takes even every time I watch it, always takes me by surprise. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I forgot this is a really interesting movie."
It's
Um
so interesting, so complex. I was watching it again going, "Wow, this is deep. I hope I can cover it all."
Well, I feel like
Do
we
it
did a
justice.
I feel like we did a pretty good job encapsulating what the movie is, what it has to say, and hopefully getting some people to track it down. So,
Yes.
thanks again for coming on. Can you tell people where they can find you on social media?
I try and spend a little bit of time everywhere, spending the most probably on TikTok at Piercing Cinema, my last name, Piercing Cinema. Other than that, Instagram, pretty much everywhere else, I'm at kpierce624. Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, spending a lot of time over there. Try and dip into X, when I can as well. So
Yeah, yeah,
I usually
likewise.
push all my stuff out through there, all my Geek Girl Authority reviews. I try and market it wherever I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. We'll definitely be in touch.
Love it. Yeah, always glad to do it. So wherever you'll have me, I'd definitely jump in.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kim.
Oh, thank you.